Jason, can you hear me?
Yes.
Out of the sudden, I don't know how. I'm a host now. You should take the host rights from me and put it on yourself.
So we are live now.
Yeah, everyone is a co-host.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that the camera and audio can begin.
Okay. Okay. Great. Good.
We will be starting shortly.
Yep.
Okay, I think we will get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Arelis Bellorini, and I'm the Senior UN Representative for World Vision based in New York. And we are happy to have you here today. Thank you for attending this event. The High Level Political Forum is in its 5th day of deliberations today. As of this afternoon, it will start with the VNR presentations. And at the end of this year's HLPF, we will have over 200 VNR reports presented since 2016. As you all know, the VNRs are one of the critical follow-up and review mechanisms for the 2030 Agenda, as it tracks progress on SDGs implementation. A lot of preparation goes into developing a VNR, and civil society organizations in particular mobilize around it, either to provide inputs to the report or to prepare its own spotlight reporting or alternative reports, as we know them. At the time of the presentation, countries bring their ministers. They prepare and elaborate videos, and some of the reports are actually quite massive. I remember Indonesia report 2 years ago was over 500 pages. So I would say the smallest report is not less than 200 pages. It may imply that indeed the country has gone through a significant review at country level on their progress and achievement of the SDGs. Such review must certainly provide the country with visibility into gaps and challenges, in addition to some good practices and achievements. Today, we wish to reflect on what happens after the country has presented the VNR report at HLPF here in New York in July. What happens with those gaps and challenges that they may have identified during the process of developing the VNR? How do countries take into account the spotlight report from civil society? And usually there are many of those reports. The comments presented to them by civil society during their presentation, because as you know, there is a moment during the presentation where civil society is given the floor to present a 2-minute comment on the VNR report. So these are many questions to answer. We think it is important we start delving into a solid follow-up to post VNR presentation. And that is what we wanted to reflect on today. Follow-up should not end with the VNR presentation here in New York. Countries need to pick up from their presentation and report on how they address all these questions. So for this discussion today, we have an excellent group of colleagues who have been very much involved in VNRs in their countries, and I'm sure they will enlighten us on what happens at country level once the New York presentation is over, when the country is off UN Web TV and the attention of hundreds of civil society representatives is no longer in the room, nor are there over 100 member states that attend HLPF. So really looking forward to listening to this set of colleagues that I'm sure will enlighten us. We have Salimata Bokoum. She's a Sight Savers Country Director in Senegal. She will be speaking to us on the experience on developing the VNR and the follow-up from the National SDG Coalition in Senegal from that perspective. We have my colleague Miguel Angel Laporta de Caso. He's a World Vision country director in Mexico. He will share with us a summary analysis of Mexico's 3 reports regarding children as a group that is often left behind. We also have with us Gunther Bachmann. He has served as Secretary General for the German Sustainability Council, and he brings in the German experience on VNRs and follow-up. And our colleague Ushita de Soisa, he's the chairman of Global Sustainability Solutions, who will be speaking to us on the Voluntary People's Review, which is this another reporting system that's coming from civil society and trying to ensure inclusive transformation. So really looking forward to having all of these colleagues with us. And without much ado, I would like to go over to Salimata. Salimata, can you please share with us your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. As you said, I'm starting to country director, I have the privilege
of I'm sorry, Salimata, can you come closer to the microphone?
Hello?
That's better.
That's better? So I was saying that in addition to my role as country director for Site Savers, I have the privilege to lead the civil society working groups in Senegal. And through that platform, the engagement with the government was still ongoing following the first VNR we did in 2018. As you said, we did understand that the collaboration should not end by the end of the VNR, and we anticipated on that. So our platform remained very active in terms of interaction with government, and that platform include several stakeholders, academia, private sector, others organization that formally meet on a regular basis, let's say quarterly basis, but informally also on a monthly basis to discuss issues with government. We think that maintaining that collaboration, that interaction definitely helped in terms of annual reporting on SDGs, because the government decided beyond the country report that they present during HFPF to work on the annual report to share, progress on a yearly basis. And civil society was able to join that process and to maintain the close collaboration with various sectorial ministries to be able to follow up, specific thematics. We can come back to, different work or action that have been taken by member states to facilitate that collaboration with civil society around the SDGs implementation, but around also the engagement they took during the previous VNR. That's for me a kind of introduction, and maybe if there is other questions, I may come back.
Thank you so much, Salimata. It's really very interesting to affirm to what you share with us, that the national platform of civil society remains active. That is really very, very important. And yeah, the fact that the government has decided to do an annual report at national level and share progress on this yearly basis is actually a good practice. Yeah, as we go on the conversation here, we would like to hear more about some of the outcomes of that reporting. What is what is the progress that they are reporting on? But now let me just move on to my colleague Miguel Angel Laporta de Caso, from the director of World Vision in Mexico, and really looking forward to hearing what you have to share with us today, Miguel, on the 3 years of reporting for Mexico, and what do they have to say on children? Over to you.
Thank you, Relis. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with all of you today. Just as a background, I think it's important to highlight that Mexico has presented reports in 3 years so far in 2016.
I'm sorry, Miguel. Can you come closer to the microphone?
Sure. Be better now?
A bit better.
Bit better. There? Is it
Yes.
better now?
Yes.
Okay. So I was saying that it's important to highlight that Mexico has presented reports in 2016, 2018, and 2021. At the very beginning, the Mexican government has been very high committed with the SDGs agenda. But in these times, two things have happened, and I think that it changed a bit the course of the agenda, locally speaking. First, the national government has changed during the SDG implementations. Now we have a new government since 3 years ago, which is more focused in a populism government, and therefore, unfortunately, this hasn't been like a main priority for the local administration. And also, like any other country, COVID-19 represents a huge challenge to achieve the SDG agenda. What we're seeing in the ground, in operating our programs and talking to the people in the local and rural communities, is that they are really facing very different challenges from 3 or 2 years ago. So in the national context, we did a paper in order to analyze what is happening regarding child poverty. How are the budget allocations? How is the violence against the children? And also a very important topic, which is how the children are getting involved in order to hear their voices, and what are the effects of the COVID-19, like as I mentioned. Mainly the main findings is that the kinds of institution are the institutions are losing a bit of meaning and influence. But most of all, the most affected population is the children and the adolescents. Just to put you an example, children between 5 to 12 are just beginning to be able to get the vaccine only 2 weeks ago in Mexico. So also another finding that we're finding is that the cross-sector partnerships are not working, or these cross-sector alliances could work in a much better way. Civil society has been seen as another actor aside of the government, and the local government is trying to implement their own strategies more based on their own. So social society is fighting at federal level to work closer with the government, but in a better way at state and municipality levels. So our recommendations of this paper and looking forward, I think, is illustrating the coordination mechanisms between all levels of government to include this new normality, because what we are seeing is that this new normality, if we can call it that so far, it's a great opportunity to renew the mechanisms, the mechanisms, and enhance the agenda to allocate human, financial, and technological public resources. Definitely, that's something that has to move forward, and also to ensure that the people participation with special focus on children, adolescents, and the youth, and also to increase the qualitative analysis mechanisms for the voluntary report, also in order to have a more clear information about this, so we can give better crucial as an NGO we can give a better follow-up.
Thank you so much, Miguel. I think it really caught my attention, this issue of how the shifts that happens when there is a change in government and how the focus goes into another direction. And then the momentum that governments have regarding the SDGs gets basically stuck. So that's, that's very, very unfortunate. Also very sad to hear that younger children have not had access to vaccine. We are 2 years, more than 2 years into this global pandemic. And in Mexico, only 2 weeks ago, you had younger children getting their vaccines. That is indeed an issue of huge inequality. I think it's very important, the paper that you mentioned, particularly that is going to be looking at the coordination mechanisms at all levels. That points directly into the theme that we are trying to delve into today, which is, what are the steps that governments take after they have presented their VNR, so that they can come back with another VNR and present something perhaps even much more substantive, and perhaps something that follows up where they left off in the previous VNR. So thank you for sharing all of that. Gunther, let me turn to you. I'm really looking forward to hearing the German experience on this. Germany has been very active in the VNR conversation, not only presenting reports, but also supporting civil society engagement, and not only at a country level, but also facilitating civil society across the world to engage in this process. Over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I'm not anymore in my position, and still I'm at the HLPF, which is a nice surprise. Thank you for this. My first point would be on what I call the embedded VNR. In Germany, the sustainable development policies have a long history, since 2001, if you can call it long. We started in 2001, and the VNR came in the last years as a new kid on the block, and it added value. And you might ask, well, if you are doing sustainable development strategies for so long, what kind of value added the VNR and the SDG and the 2030 agenda? Quite simple. When we started, the political mainstream said to us, well, this is some kind of typical NGO ideology, and get away with quantified targets and timetables that are longer than 4 years. That seems to be socialist, and we don't like it. And now we can say that since 2015, the whole world is doing this. And without any legal pressure, the whole world is doing VNRs. So it's mainstreaming. And your question is, what is Germany doing after having delivered a VNR? Well, in Germany, the big show is not the VNR, but the national strategy. And that goes on and on. Every 4 years, we have an update, we have new targets, adjusted indicators. Every year we have a main discussion in Parliament. And we have the council as an advisor and a gatekeeper in terms of staying active in the society. And we have, of course, lots of dialogue formats with civil society. So the pattern of staying active is somewhat special, I would say, because since 2009, we did 3 peer reviews, inviting peers from the international level, kind of eye level with the Chancellor, to report and to assess what is Germany doing and to report to the Chancellor and get him or her directly involved. So refreshing, rethinking, and retuning is what peer review is doing. And peer review is high end of civil society involvement. There are less ambitious tools available, but the peer review is that what we did. Second, on a national level, we are engaging subnational teams, regional hubs, networks, sectoral sustainability hubs. And we have kind of sustained development award system, a couple of other awards. What's one of the big ones is the German Sustainability Award, going out to enterprises, to civil society, to researchers, and to local cities. And still, having all this, we are still off track if you look at the most important SDGs. And this is a funny thing, because in this year and last year, I think we see in Germany a growing public support for the very idea of sustainability. And more enterprises are checking in. But still, the sustainability as a comprehensive approach to the crisis in the world loses some ground in Germany because the politics are focusing on very specific energy topics, climate topics, and other topics. They seem to be left on the back burner, like biodiversity or hunger in the world. So this is what I would like to share with you. And the question, what comes next, is we're going to have to change gear. I think we have to leave this, what I call is kind of an as-if phase of international sustainability politics, as if it matters, as if the HLPF matters. And actually it does matter. Of course it doesn't matter, because it attracts so many people, so many ideas. But if you ask a person here in Germany on the street, a regular German, even if he reads main newspapers, he would have no idea that an HLPF is happening. The HLPF in a nutshell is kind of classified matter. He would think the media coverage is zero, as this is the best kept secret that you are sitting in New York now. So this has to change. The second thing, we have to talk about delivery, not about setup and institutional framings, and that's not delivery. And the third point is we're going to have to talk about international missions, like the Climate Club, like the pricing system for CO2, and Article 6. Article 6 is the most neglected, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is the most neglected tool. And we have to step up here and to bring international community to these points, including the VNRs, of course, including what is done nationally. That is what I want to share with you. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gunther. It's so interesting what you say about HLPF. Indeed, about 2 years ago, there was a review of HLPF, and they were trying to see how it could work much better. But if after 2 years of that review, there is still this lack of public knowledge on such an important body and mechanism to follow up on the implementation of the SDGs, then something is definitely wrong with HLPF. And to me, it really, well, it's sad to see that so much effort goes into preparing for the VNR presentation in HLPF. And particularly, as I was saying before, with civil society, so much energy and so much effort and so much review of the implementation on the SDGs at national level, that then, you know, how does that translate into actual accountability on a commitment that was made in 2015 regarding the 2030 agenda. And also, when you say that, you mentioned all of the mechanisms that are there in Germany for the national follow-up and the national review of SDG implementation, and yet, you know, so many SDGs off track. So we can only think, you know, how that relates to many other countries that may not have all of those mechanisms in place.
Sure, yeah.
Then we are seriously off track in general on the SDGs, and I think we never cease to say that. But it's so disheartening to confirm it over and over and over again. But let us now look at the voluntary people's review. This is something that has been gaining momentum, and I am so glad that Ushita is here to share with us more about that. So not only do we have the VNRs, but we also have the voluntary local reviews, but in this case, we're talking about voluntary people's review. So over to you, Ushita, to enlighten us on this.
Thank you so much. And it's extremely late down here, past 11 p.m. in the night. But once I got to know this evening, I just put some slides together. Can someone upload the slides? Is it available from your side? Or? Okay, yeah, I mean, I thought that it would be better for everybody to have a contextualizing as to the first part of what I want to say. First thing is that we are in the having these discussions in the context of the high-level political forum. The high-level political forum replaces effectively the Commission for Sustainable Development, which in my opinion, I have been engaged in the process since the first Rio Earth Summit, and which was an utter failure, which led down Agenda 21 across the world. So the relevance of HLPF is if it can encourage governments to engage in an inclusive transformation and recalibrate the context for an honest partnership between the state and non-state actors with greater intensity and urgency. I was the chief negotiator for Sri Lanka for 2 years, 2016 and 2017 to HLPF, plus the entire SDG process across the world, representing the country in my capacity as the advisor to the government at that time on sustainable development. But I have not seen HLPF acting in a proactive manner. It does not demonstrate its name of being a political forum by any means. It just goes through the motions year by year. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. And we come to the voluntary national reviews. How relevant are the voluntary national reviews? Do they provide actual insight into local to global transformation? I have not heard the word transformation being used in the past several years. People just talk about SDGs. SDGs are just pathways to look at how we are doing and monitoring, but there are very limited monitoring as mechanisms across the world in countries. Sri Lanka to date does not have. Are they representative of whole of government and whole of society? Sri Lanka is presenting its second VNR, just like the first time. It is just a third-party written document, a consultancy given to somebody, just to write a very nice document and present it to. It doesn't represent the people. It doesn't represent whole of government. It leaves out the subnational level actors. Are they derived through a methodological approach with data collection? Absolutely not. These are just reports written just as a pacification process. And how can then HLPF assess the progress if actual transformation or gaps are not honestly reported? Does HLPF want to truly assess the gaps through country assessments? If that is the case, there must be a prototype way. A VNR is just the guidelines, are very soft guidelines as to how a country should do. It does not talk about how the data should be used, how the monitoring should be happening, how the reporting should happen at the national to local levels. But mostly, where is the dialogue when a VNR comes to New York? Where's the dialogue? People are just in different rooms and talking different things. And there are civil society groups who go on to different rooms and have their own, while governments are let scot-free in the process. So how are global assessments made without inclusive reviews? And at the end of the day, I have said this as the chief negotiator, it is recorded in the UN. HLPF must recognize an inclusive transformation. Otherwise, there's no meaning of HLPF to continue go through its motions for the next 8 years or so. Next slide, please. Now, this brings us to what is happening in Sri Lanka. The country, the national review, Sri Lanka is in its greatest, deepest political and economic crisis. To date, we do not know whether the president is in the country or not. We do not have a government that is in operation. We do not have fuel for the people. There are no dollars to buy fuel. There's energy being cut down all over the place. People can't go to their work or anywhere. No, there's no transport modes because of this. There's a food crisis looming, huge problem. And the government decides to, under the influence of UN agencies operating in the country and very individual agendas of bureaucrats, politically appointed, who decided to come and present a voluntary national review. Now, no one knows about the review even, and it is insignificant to the country, and it is meaningless. Now, because of that, we had to do more. Now, in 2018, we established a Sri Lanka stakeholder SDG platform because there was no engagement methodology after we left the process from the government. So the Voluntary People's Review for the first time came up in 2018. This is the first of a kind in the world. And there are a few other countries who are looking at this as a modeling. The People's Scorecard from A4SD is an inspiration from what we did in 2018. This time it's a deeper one. I'll explain that. A voluntary subnational review, which we conducted this year with UCLG partnering with us. And thirdly, the People's Scorecard with A4SD, which is an offshoot of what we do. And then a voluntary focused review on, and we have done SDG 14 last year. This year, we are doing SDG 16 plus spotlight report supported by TAP. Next slide, please. Most important, this is where it's important for not only us, the world. Any kind of a SDG review needs to be based on a process and a review methodology. We take a two-pronged approach. First one is a micro assessment, which we looked at the 169 targets measured by the 244 indicators. Even though we are an independent group, we have been looking at the data. The countries across the world, including Sri Lanka, continues to say that we do not have data. It is not the lack of data, but there's a whole heap of a huge data democracy problem that we see not only in the country, in the world as well. And there's no disaggregated data being collected, monitored. But we have been doing this since 2018, and we have looked at the 244 global indicators and measured, and this goes into volumes and volumes of documentation. The second part is called the macro assessment. The macro assessment is what countries don't do. These are about the transformative actions like integration, mainstreaming, financing, localizing, engagement, inclusion, leave no one behind. And for the first time, we are taking a scale. Now, again, the micro assessment, 169 targets through 244 indicators. The macro assessment is under 5 main transformative areas using 30 elements of items, aspects that we have selected. So it is 17 into the 169 plus the 17 into 30 indicators that we are using, and we use a -5 to +5. -5 is when there's a large reduction, and +5 is when there's a high progress. And I'm glad that Action for Sustainable Development's countries who are doing the People's Scorecard have adopted what we are doing in Sri Lanka. Next slide, please. I think it's the last one. Yeah, so this is something that we came up in 2020 in a book called Localizing the Transformation in the New Normal, and presented the first time domestic resource mobilization framework. This is not only for Sri Lanka, but it takes a Sri Lankan context. The main aspect is that if any country wants to implement the SDGs and achieve them, they need to recalibrate the context that they apply. So policy, localizing, financing, and the transformation, the context needs to be recalibrated too. And then you need to look at how the kind of aspects that you are looking at, the national, subnational, local levels that you want to work out. Now, finalize what I have to say and end what I'm trying to say is that one is that the voluntary national reviews are insignificant pieces of document across the world. Countries like Sri Lanka have a meaningless process in the HLPF. HLPF becomes meaningless if HLPF does not have an accountability process of governments across the world. And thirdly, there's no way that the country can progress towards a transformation if there's no a minimum dialogue between the stakeholders and the governments congregating as a high-level political forum. And I will leave it at that, and I'll come to any question and answer session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ushita. And indeed, the situation in Sri Lanka is a very dire situation. Evidently, any follow-up will be tarnished by the situation of the country. But it is interesting here that you say, you know, how the VNRs can really be meaningless without an accountability process. And again, you know, when we started this webinar, I mentioned the number of over 200 reports. And then if these reports are not really, are meaningless, at least for most of them, then how is the process of actually tracking progress on the SDG taking place? Because on the other hand, we also hear about the challenges that national statistic institutions have on when it comes to data. So this raises a very important question about reliability of the tracking of progress. So this is very important contribution to this conversation. Friends, everyone, can you please put your questions in the box? If you have any question for any of the panelists, please, this is the moment that we would like to invite you to post them, and so that we can share it with the panelists and get some responses. In the meantime, while you put your questions there, let me come back to Salimata. Salimata, you have a very important experience in Senegal. The National Coalition on SDG, which is made up of so many civil society organizations from across the country, is a very solid one, and it's one of the oldest one that I can remember or that I hear. Would you like to share more of the experience that you have on that, and the follow-up and the VNRs as a whole?
Sure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to elaborate more on the actions, the work we did in terms of follow-up of the VNR, because I think the different conversation we are hearing here just to show the importance of continuing that conversation to make sure that all the engagement will be implemented. For Senegal, I think the engagement that government took during the last VNR were to increase civil society participation, but also to materialize or to operationalize this leave no one behind principle. Those are the main engagement they took, and it was also an opportunity for us as a civil society to make sure that they will do something around that. We did continue the communication, that open debate around how talking about the leave no one behind principle, how people at the very local level can be involved and give their feedback. I think that bring the government to the stage where they decided to work on the national strategy to leave no one behind. It was very important for them to understand where are the vulnerable group you are talking about. Who are they? What are their priority and their need? And how these can be translated into national program and policies. We did follow a lot of action in collaboration with the Ministry of Cooperation, Economic and Cooperation, to make sure that this will be translated as they engage. Several activities, several consultations, several discussion happen, leading to the draft of the national strategy, which a clear roadmap first, I may say, which decline the different process that they will follow to have that national strategy to leave no one behind. And we hope in this year, 2022, they will be finalizing that strategy to be implemented. Another one commitment around that strategy, because a lot of people talked about here the importance of data. And we know that in the difference of the MDGs, the SDGs are focusing a lot on data, because without data, we cannot know if those engagements will be implemented and will be in line with the principle to leave no one behind. And we know that talking about data, one important element is data that are disaggregated, and as a follow-up action, the civil society group were able to influence government to engage for more disaggregation on data by becoming a champion of the IDC, which is the Inclusive Data Charter, which were launched here in New York in 2018. And a clear action plan has also been designed by government to tell us how they will be working on that, how they will manage to have inclusive data, how they will collaborate with the different sectorial ministries to have, mechanism and systems that will lead to that, and how as a civil society will be able to monitor that. So Senegal, as next step, also will be launching that IDC action plan. We were seeing a lot of commitment around disaggregation by disability. We know that was a huge gap. We were seeing a lot of engagement around the localization aspect of the SDGs, how they will take into account the need from different territories, and definitely we'll be following that to make sure that it will be translated into realities. I think one element that I want to add is that collaboration interaction we were having with the specific sectorial ministries, because we know that talking about data, talking about the programs and policy, it was very important that the engagement that the government took at a very international level, that those ministries, departmental ministries, own that engagement and translate that engagement through the implementation of the different program. Several discussions happened with Minister of Education, Minister of Health, Ministry of, in charge of water and sanitation, different ministries, just to remind them that engagement and to monitor how they will be translated there. As a result, we saw lot of monitoring mechanism at those ministries level, very well integrated. All this aspect we were talking about, the vulnerable groups, needs, etc., and producing evidence and the gaps, because when they were able to have those mechanisms to monitor, information, they were seeing the gaps, and those gaps enable to reorient the programs, and they're implementing. And that's the discussion we were having with the government to make sure that the engagement they took will become a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salimata. Very interesting about the IDC action plan and the focus on disaggregated data. Indeed, the leave no one behind approach or vision, very difficult to achieve it without having a very thorough data disaggregation that can give us visibility into those that are traditionally left behind. I want to call your attention to a comment that our friend Mariana Besham just put in the chat box. She just reminded us that she did a review, an analysis of the HLPF review that took place in 2021. And she shared the link there. I invite you to read that. I'm going to post it again here, the link, so that you can get an access to it. In that analysis, which I have read, is a very substantive analysis, talks about the whole process of the review and some of the sticky points and that were not able to be agreed among member states, but also some of the things that could have made the HLPF review much more important for HLPF to actually deliver on its mandate. But there are some good things that came out of that review as well. So I invite you to take a look at that one. We also have a question from Marianne to our panelists here. So the question here is, should DESA or others be invited to assess and evaluate the VNR reports for the upcoming SDG Summit in September next year, 2023? And any other ideas on how to make better use of the VNRs for that summit, that is also the midterm review of the 2030 agenda? Any of the panelists? Gunther?
Yeah, if you like me, Arelis, I would like to comment this. But first of all, I would like to say that Uchita is completely right. If there is no accountability in the country, then there is no accountability at all. And I'm feeling with him on the situation in Sri Lanka, and I can imagine that it is hard to talk about HLPF and VNRs when you have a country that is so deep into the problems. But then the question of Marianne, yes, of course, I think that the VNRs are a source for progress, and they have to be made a source for progress. And that means that anyone, maybe UNDESA, maybe a different organization, should bring this knowledge together and boil it down to the most important points, keeping the sense of urgency alive that brought us all together in 2012 and developing the SDGs. That has to be renewed. And I think the improvement of following up processes of VNRs, that was tried. I mean, we tried it nationally. There was no majority for this, as well as the verification idea. So it's not only reviewing and reporting and monitoring plus verification. That did not make the SDG agreement. And we are now in the position to just work with the tools that we have at hand. And one of the tools is to digest and assess what the world is telling with the VNRs. But I want to focus your attention also on the UN internal reform process run by the Deputy Secretary General. I think the idea of delivering as one is a very important idea for the UN institutions, and we have some 30 developing institutions here, mission-based. Is an idea, and the idea is to strengthen the UN institutions in the countries, in the regions. And I think it would be wonderful if those institutions would be brought together in order to assess region-wise or cross-region-wise the VNRs. So it's not only DESA. I think DESA is a good idea of Marianne, but that is quite the usual thing. We should not only invite UNDESA to do something, but we should bring UNDESA into the position, capacity-wise, connection-wise, politics-wise, to do that kind of thing that is a little bit out of step, out of the normal, of the ordinary, off script, to invite UN institutions, in reformed institutions, to be part of this process, and not only DESA alone. That would be, I think, worth a try. But otherwise, the accountability in each country itself is a key element here. And accountability does not only mean legal accountability, kind of political, cultural accountability. It can be a personalized accountability, and it can be an accountability via media exposure. That is something we all have to think about, to get the business of VNRs out of the shade, so to say, out of this small little community that we are still.
Thank you, Gunther. And I think that's a very important point, how to bring the whole of the UN into this accountability process, particularly, taking into account that process of the UN delivering as one, which is the centerpiece of the UN reform that has been going on for years, but that has made some important progress lately. Yeah, very, very important view on the whole of the UN and going beyond DESA. DESA is more like the secretariat of HLPF, but here we need definitely something much more bigger than that, and the whole of the UN would be much more suitable indeed. Any of the other panelists that would like to comment on
Mariana.
that? Yes, Wichita.
Yeah. So first of all, Mariana, I just had a quick look at your link, and very exciting analysis. Now, there are 2 points. I'll start with where Gunther left over. First of all, the United Nations system itself, with 500 plus multilateral environmental agreements, and not knowing who is responsible for what, is a highly fragmented institutional mechanism itself. And its fragmentation shows in its competition and its inability to bring it down to country levels. The second part is that trying to have an assessment based on voluntary national reviews, which does not have a methodological process of assessment, and becomes another political document which will have to be manipulated, maneuvered differently. Some of the independent reviews or assessments or dashboards across the world also tend to present data in a way. Sometimes I must confess that some of the dashboards across the world do not seem to represent the country that I'm living in. The country that I live in, the realities, and some of the dashboards that they are presenting as Sri Lanka is doing so well on certain things, do amuse me to an extent of being laughing stock. Then you get agencies like UNESCAP keep on putting very weird data about our countries which does not exist, and they tend to have their own modules. So the first thing is that if HLPF does not have a review methodology which can be streamlined for countries to be based on actual reviews, reporting back from a whole of government to, which means the subnational level inclusions, and then stock taking from the independent reportings that happens from across the world, not just for the VNRs, but for all different thematic aspects, sectoral aspects, then it becomes another political review more than an actual scientific review. So that is critically important. But the most important thing is whether a future summit actually becomes a future summit, not another summit to keep the relevance of HLPF alive. It's dying faster than the Commission for Sustainable Development is dying. There's very limited interest other than people coming to New York from different parts of the world and honestly enjoying themselves on a trip rather than much. And civil society is struggling to find places to do their own things and going online now. So my response would be going into a future summit, HLPF needs to assess, first of all, whether its mechanism is correct, whether it makes any relevance to rest of the world other than talking to a handful of people in different countries, and then a few agencies intervening from the UN and manipulating itself, the processes at country level as well. Second is that HLPF through ECOSOC needs to review the crises of the world, where the breakdown scenarios are, and whether the countries are addressing the breakdown scenarios. The world is in serious breakdown scenarios. The pandemic was an induced breakdown, not listening to all the warnings of climate change, to ecological boundaries, to all of that. So I think the lack of peace in the world and invasions on other countries are part and parcel of not listening to what people are talking about around the world. And the UN's existence itself will have to be reconsidered if governments are becoming, not being considered by their people itself. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, it brings us back to what you were saying earlier during your presentation. It's about inclusive transformation. Bottom line, it's about that. Thank you so much for that. Gunter, I see your hands up. Is that a new one or?
Yeah, that's a new one.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Arelis. I would like to directly respond to Uchita, because you're right, Uchita. If you get these things wrong, then they get politically manipulated. And it's good to have now out a book by Paula Caballero and Patti Londoño. Those two ladies have kind of invented the SDGs back in 2011 and 12. And when they convinced the old-nosed diplomats of the world to do something new, the SDGs, then there was a question, would that be a negotiating process along the lines of diplomacy? In parentheses, then it would be spoiled and politically manipulated, parentheses. Or would it be something that is put on the level of a technical working group? That would be the open working group. And you can read in the book of Paula and Patty how this worked out and why this is so important to get things right. And that is then you have the SDGs produced by a technical working group with more politics, with more convening power than ever before. So this is my answer to the problem of political manipulation. It's governance, and you can do it the right way. We had the example in 2012 to 15. And what I'm saying about UNDESA and the UN reform system, nothing against UNDESA, it's a great institution, but you're right, there are lots of them, and they're fragmented, and that is exactly why there is this reform process. And we should support the reform process and not think that that is something that is only for the UN maniacs inside the system. It's outside the system, it's our system. And that is why we have to use it at best. That is why I make this proposal to engage the UN development system as a whole. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. We are short of time now, but I would like to, I see Salimata's hand is up. So I will go over to you, and after Salimata, let me come back to Miguel, as I want to ask him about children in the context of all of these challenges. But Salimata, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to add a quick point on the this debate around, how to strengthen the VNR, in terms of follow-up. I do agree on everything my colleagues just said, but just want to bring that participation of civil society in during that process. It's very important. We have, at the front line, those actors, interacting with communities. We were talking about the former of the HLPF, but who are the actors here that are representing, the communities? A lot of work is ongoing at national levels, where we manage to follow up, government engagement, and that should be assessed. And somebody was talking about this morning about a kind of midterm assessment of CSO engagement and follow-up action, and how this can be served, that this can serve as a learning, for others. We were talking about countries that are lagging behind. How could these experiences can be shared as best practice to improve, the follow-up action at a wider level, because it's a matter of everybody succeeding. So I think this can be a good thing in terms of bringing that debate at the UN level. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Miguel, before we close the webinar for today, I wanted to come back to you and ask a few additional words on the paper that you did on the review of the 3 years of Mexico report, VNR reports, and regarding children and how they are featured or not featured in that context. Over to you.
Thank you, Aurelio. I think it not only for Mexico, but also for many other countries, it is really important to have for the childhood and youngsters at the center of the social strategies, because in many cases, unfortunately, they are left out. We have seen in the last months, not only in Mexico, but also worldwide, how is the violence increasing from, unfortunately, we have seen shootings, many other notes about many types of violence that our society is suffering. And of course, the children are not the exception. So I always, I have the opportunity locally, I say that unfortunately the kids are not voting. So therefore they are not at the center of the political strategies. But I think that it is really important to consider their thoughts in our public policy, because they are unfortunately the most vulnerable population. So I think that also something that we have to keep in mind, if after what had happened in the world after these 2 years of COVID, the scenarios that we're living now with wars and everything, is if the priorities of the SDG should remain as it was. Because I think that the priorities might, the conditions now are really different than in a previous years. Now, just to give an example about education, the condition of the education in many other countries, not only Mexico or developing countries, have changed a lot. The education dropout now these days it's much more different than a few years ago. So for me, I think that looking forward it's really important to keep this agenda up, to keep these topics on the table in order to continue moving this forward. So
thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank all and each one of you. I know for you, Shita and Gunther, this is very late in your day, so really appreciative that you have extended your working day to be here with us today. And Salimata, thank you so much for all your contribution. Miguel, these are a lot of food for thoughts which is great. This is what we really need to be discussing about. Mariana has also indicated in the chat there that there is another book, an academic book coming out in July, and she's posting the link there for everyone to see it. We will be sharing the link to this recording in an email that Zoom usually sends out an email, so we'll include the link to this recording, and we will also include the link that Marianne has shared kindly with us today. Thank you so much, and I'm sure many of you are going back to HLPF and VNRs this afternoon, and the rest of the week is full of VNRs. Yeah, a lot to think about, a lot to reflect, and so on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Wish you all the best.
You too.